My name is Jim Wiley, the Sierra Club of Pennsylvania's Conservation Co-Chair and a member of the Pennsylvania PFAS Coalition. Besides the Sierra Club, the PFAS Coalition consists of representatives from the Delaware Riverkeeper Network, Conservation Voters of PA and Penn Future, Penn Environment, Move Past Plastics, Clean Water Action, Mountain Watershed Association, and the Buxmont Coalition for Safe Water. You'll be hearing from most of these organizations momentarily as we make our case for establishing strong limits on PFAS contamination in our groundwater. And we are happy to welcome Senator Carolyn Comitta, who will be making a statement as well. After these brief statements, and we'll be happy to answer any questions from the press or anyone else that's online. We're inviting the press to use the Q&A portion to put your questions in. We are here today to deliver a petition signed by 28 organizations that care about having safe drinking water in Pennsylvania. Tracy, actually, the group of us delivered this petition to the Department of Energy Protection earlier today. So let's start with a brief statement from Tracy Carluccio from the Delaware Riverkeeper Network.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Jim. Welcome, everybody. We're here today because Pennsylvania has proposed drinking water standards called maximum contaminant levels, or MCLs, for two very dangerous PFAS that are commonly found in Pennsylvania's drinking water. That's PFOA and PFOS. PFAS are highly toxic compounds used for decades in making items such as nonstick cooking utensils, Teflon, durable plastics like Kevlar, stain repellent coatings, maybe you've heard of Stain Master, and many other consumer products like food wrappers and cosmetics. PFAS are so ubiquitous in our environment that most Americans have some level in our blood, and they've even found it in polar bears in the Arctic. PFAS are highly toxic in minuscule amounts. That's why they're called forever chemicals, because they never break down in the environment and they build up in the body because they are difficult to excrete. That's what makes them so toxic. As levels of PFAS increase in your body, the risk of developing disease that is linked to PFAS increases. Maximum contaminant levels must be adopted by DEP to mandate the removal of PFAS compounds from people's drinking water. It is absolutely essential because drinking water is the major pathway of exposure that all people in Pennsylvania are protected. And we are going to be speaking here today about the greatest protection that we believe can be attained, which is that which would also protect the fetus, infants, children, and the immune compromised. DEP has known about the dangers of PFAS for many, many years, and getting to this historic moment in Pennsylvania has been excruciatingly slow. People are entitled to pure water and air, according to Article 1, Section 27 of the Pennsylvania Constitution. This constitutional right demands that Pennsylvania adopt MCLs for PFAS as swiftly as possible and with substantive changes that we are going to be discussing here today as a coalition. The letter from 28 organizations from all across the Commonwealth represent diverse populations and was submitted in order to show DEP and the Environmental Quality Board how deep and broad the concern is amongst the people of Pennsylvania. We will also be submitting that letter electronically to the official comment record for the proposed rulemaking. Now we're going to go and have different speakers on different subjects. Very quickly, we want more protective maximum contaminant levels for PFOA and PFOS than what has been proposed. We want to make sure that more PFAS compounds are included in the rulemaking, requiring that all of those compounds be removed from water. We want all wells in the state to be covered by the safe drinking water standards, including private water wells. And we want speedy implementation of the MCLs. And we want comprehensive and ongoing water supply monitoring of PFAS to continue regardless of the current sampling result. So that's just a quick overview. Our PFAS Coalition in Pennsylvania is advocating for these changes during the public comment period. That record is open until April 27th, which is why we are having our press conference here today and handing in this letter to raise awareness so more people can put comments on the record to call for the greatest protection for all Pennsylvanians. So that's the introduction I wanted to give. I'm also going to cover one of the issues which we are asking for and feel that it's very important that Pennsylvania provide, and that is equal protection for all. The plan, according to the EQB and DEP, applies only to public water systems, and that's excluding private water wells, which leaves a large number of Pennsylvanians unprotected by this rule. All water supplies, including individual private wells, should be included. The proposed rulemaking should guarantee equal protection by applying to all of them. To do otherwise, between 1/4 and 1/3 of Pennsylvania's population who use individual private water wells is being left out of the sampling and the protection that would be provided by a maximum contaminant level that covered their water as well. And worse than that even is that they'd be in the dark because they wouldn't know if they're drinking water that's contaminated or not. And that gives a false sense of security to those who haven't been included in the program because you can't assume it's not there. There are many, many sources of PFAS throughout the Commonwealth. So just because you don't live near the hottest hot points that everybody knows about, like military facilities and manufacturing facilities, airports or firefighting, doesn't mean that you are not at risk of drinking water contaminated with PFAS. So as evidence that the individual private wells are at risk, there are studies that show that, for instance, the USGS published in a peer-reviewed paper that PFAS chemicals in 20% of the private wells was found, and 60% of public wells was found, and that was throughout 16 states in the United States. So this is not a pie in the sky or an overreach on the part of our coalition. We know it's in people's water who drink individual water wells too, and we think every person in Pennsylvania must be protected. Thank you very much, and I'm going to turn it over now to Stephanie Wine from Penn Environment.
Hi there, everybody. My name is Stephanie Wine, and I'm the Clean Water and Conservation Advocate at Penn Environment. So we are gratified to see that after years of advocacy, the Pennsylvania DEP has proposed the first maximum contaminant levels for PFAS chemicals. But I'm here to speak to the point that that should be applied to a much broader range within the category of PFAS substances. Maximum contaminant levels for PFAS and PFOA are an important first step in protecting the public from chemicals that disrupt our hormones, are linked to everything from cancers to developmental delays to immune suppression and muted vaccine response. But we also are here to remind the DEP and the Commonwealth that PFAS and PFOA are only two of a very broad class of thousands of types of PFAS chemicals. And so they represent just the tip of a very toxic iceberg. And as our society has come to recognize the health risks of PFAS and of PFOA, they've been replaced by new PFAS chemicals like Gen X, only for it to then later become clear that these new PFAS chemicals pose similar, if not more serious health risks. Going after PFAS and PFOA on their own is like playing regulatory whack-a-mole. We have to address the entire class of PFAS chemicals. The DEP's own surveillance for PFAS makes that clear. When in 2019 and 2020, the DEP investigated drinking water in Pennsylvania for PFAS chemicals, they only looked first for 6 and then 18 of the thousands of PFAS substances that exist. In their testing, 8 types of PFAS were regularly detected, often at levels well above the maximum contaminant level being proposed here for PFAS and PFOA. And yet even the PFAS that the DEP identified were not all included in this proposed rule. That means chemicals that are very similar to PFAS and PFOA and with similar documented health risks will persist in our drinking water. Because we're not looking for them, we won't find them. And therefore we can't alert the public or filter them out. We know many more PFAS compounds are in our environment and in our water And so the DEP needs to address all the PFAS chemicals that threaten our water and our health, not solely just these two. I'd now like to hand it over to Maurice of Clean Water Action.
Good afternoon. My name is Maurice Sampson, and I am the Eastern Pennsylvania Director for Clean Water Action. This rulemaking process must provide for rapid implementation with rigorous and ongoing monitoring. As it stands, once the rules are in place, it will take another 2 to 3 years before clean drinking water is available from public water tap systems. This is unacceptable. There are no safe level of these chemicals. PFOA and PFOS are toxic in parts to a trillion. That is the equivalent of the volume of an eyedropper in a 25,000-gallon swimming pool. These tiny doses build up in the body and have been documented in scientific literature to be linked to serious adverse health conditions, including cancers. Once in place, the rules should be implemented immediately. The rules should also support monitoring protocol for monthly sampling in systems that exceed the MCL and quarterly after the levels recede to the standard. Where there are no detections that are found, annual sampling should be required and there should be no waivers. PFOA and PFOS are highly mobile in water and persistent in the environment, making their migration from a source of contamination a threat that is unpredictable and can occur rapidly. Clean drinking water is essential to good health, and good health is priceless. The MCL we set in Pennsylvania should aspire to meet that standard, implemented in months and not years, and maintained with a rigorous monitoring protocol. No public or private drinking water system should be exempt. Anything less is unacceptable. And with that, let me turn this over to Michelle Geil from Conservation Voters of Pennsylvania.
The proposed maximum contaminant level standards of 14 parts per trillion for PFOA and 18 parts per trillion for PFAS are not strict enough. An analysis by Cambridge Environmental Consulting recommended a standard of 1 part per trillion for PFOA and 5 parts per trillion for PFAS in order to protect young children. The proposed standards need to deviate from using the usual adult exposure values and set the standards using children's values. Young children's exposure to these toxins can lead to increased potential for later disease manifestation. We urge the DEP to set standards that are protective of all Pennsylvanians, especially children, one of our most vulnerable populations. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Michelle. I'll invite Senator Comitta to make a statement.
Thanks so much, Jim. Hello, friends, and thanks to each of you for being here today to stand for stronger protections for our drinking water and our environment, as you always do. I thank all of our advocates and environmental groups, including the Sierra Club, Penn Environment, Conservation Voters, and the Delaware Riverkeeper Network for helping organize this effort. Maya Angelou famously said, "When you know better, you do better." Well, today we know more about PFAS compounds than ever before. We know they're so prevalent because they're used in a wide range of products and they do not readily break down. We know they persist in our bodies, and studies have linked them to a host of serious health risks. And we know that more and more states are moving to enact limits or maximum containment levels. We know better, and now it's time to do better. While I appreciate the DEP taking this first important step to better protect our drinking water from 2 forms of PFAS, there is much more that can be done. And there is much more that should be done. I stand with you to encourage the department to use this opportunity to enact even stronger protections for residents, children, and families. For the Commonwealth to truly be a leader in protecting our environmental health and public health from PFAS, we must enact even stronger rules when it comes to the size and scope of these forever chemicals in our water. And we should significantly expand the monitoring and reporting of PFAS in our water, soil, and air. To better address the risks, the impacts, and the level of contamination, we must also develop a clearer understanding of the proliferation of PFAS in our environment. And that includes addressing serious questions and concerns about their use in fracking. Pennsylvania has an opportunity to be a leader on limiting PFAS. Let's send a message, strong, loud, and clear, that we take PFAS and their potential for long-lasting, wide-ranging, and severe health impacts very seriously. DEP should significantly expand the monitoring and reporting of PFAS in our water, soil, and our air. Thank you.
Okay, thank you to everyone. First of all, I want to invite everybody in the attendance to ask questions. But first, I want to ask if anybody does not have a copy of our press release or of the petition. If you want to get an electronic copy of that, just drop your email address in the chat, and I'm sure we can make that happen. So we've got a small enough crowd. If there's nobody wants to put a written question in, raise your hand or come off mute. Well, I guess raise your hand so that we can get you to come off mute. I see Cassie.
Yes, Cassie Miller from the Pennsylvania Capital Star.
Thank you. Go ahead.
My question was, someone had mentioned some other states were starting to implement maximum containment levels. Do you have any ideas what those states are and if DEP's proposals are based off of other states' measures so far?
There's about 9 states that have taken regulatory action. Not all of them have adopted mandatory maximum contaminant levels. Most of them are that have adopted MCLs are in the range of 2 parts per trillion up to about 14 parts per trillion for PFOA and PFOS. There's some very good studies, and we're happy, maybe even before we get off, we can put a couple links in the chat for you. Or Cassie, if you want, we can send it to you by email. But there's some very good studies that have looked at the range of parts per trillion that has been adopted. And even though there has not been any state that has adopted a 0 parts per trillion, for instance, some of them are much stricter than what Pennsylvania is putting forward. And we believe that the lowest level that can be achieved, which is basically the lowest level that you can measure it at, which is somewhere between 1 and 4 parts per trillion, depending on your lab, is the level that we should be reaching for in Pennsylvania in order to provide the protection that we need. There's other regulations that have been adopted, listing PFAS as a hazardous substance, banning it most recently in Maine from being used in sewage sludge that's spread on farms. There's many different actions that are being taken to remove PFAS at the source. And those are very important too. But the first step always is for everybody to get it out of the drinking water, since that's our major exposure.
Thank you. This one's for Senator Comitta. I'm just curious if there's any legislative action or any way to take legislative action that might help, with this process and addressing PFAS in the water system.
As the minority chair for Environmental Resources and Energy Committee in the Senate, and working together with the majority chair, Senator Yaw, who is very interested in water issues and clean streams and drinking water and so on. this is something that that we can talk about, that has bipartisan support. But I think the important place to move these regulations forward are through the DEP that has already begun to take these steps, and has the opportunity to strengthen them even further. So I think this is an important place to start, which is the purpose of our press conference today. But certainly, I think there is bipartisan support for the issue at the legislative level. But for now, I think working with the DEP is probably the best.
Thank you.
Hey, thank you. I see Tracy dropped a link in the chat for the letter that we transmitted to the DEP today. Any other questions?
Jim, I would just like to add one item that we haven't discussed, and maybe it will also give Cassie a little more information. The reason that states are adopting regulations is because the federal government has none. And usually states sometimes they adopt maximum contaminant levels based on specific statewide conditions, but most states enforce and implement the maximum contaminant levels for toxic compounds that the federal government puts out there. But there are no federal standards that protect us in our drinking water from the federal government. EPA under the Biden administration has said that they are going to be moving ahead with developing a PFAS MCL. We don't know what that will look like. We don't know how many will be covered, but one thing we do know is it will take years. So we here in Pennsylvania can't wait around for the federal government to take action that they have been promising for decades. As a matter of fact, no new chemical has been had an MCL adopted by the federal government since 1998. So this is not something that we can expect reasonably that the federal government is going to follow through on. We certainly are advocating that the Biden administration do that because all states in the United States must be protected. And some states are not going to step out and do their own MCL like Pennsylvania is doing today and the other 8 states who have adopted standards.
Okay, thank you. Are there any other members of our panel that would like to answer questions that haven't been asked?
Just to state perhaps the obvious, because I don't know if anybody made this comment, but we need to remember that these are man-made chemicals. These are not naturally occurring chemicals. They were designed to not be destroyed. So this is something that we have created and brought on ourselves. And I think that that should not be forgotten in the mix of what we're dealing with here.
Thank you, Maurice. Anything else from anybody? Well, I want to thank all of our panelists, all of our dedicated researchers, and everybody that attended the press conference in Harrisburg today. A couple of them couldn't stay on for this afternoon's thing. And yeah, we'll see where we go. What is it? We have another week, the comment period. Maybe Tracy, you could talk about the opportunity to submit comments.
Yes, there's still, the record is open until April 27th, which is next Wednesday. And it's very important for people to submit comments in support of MCLs that are protective of all people of Pennsylvania. We have several action alerts that have been put out by all of our organizations: Conservation Voters of Pennsylvania, Clean Water Action, Delaware Riverkeeper Network, Penn Environment. We have all put out action alerts to make it as easy as possible for somebody to look at the data, look at the science, and make recommendations in their written comment that they submit. we really have already seen a great response to our action alerts. Approximately 2,400 actions have been taken by members of our collective organizations, saying to Pennsylvania, we want stronger protection. We want the greatest level of protection that we can for all people in Pennsylvania through the adoption of strict and protective MCLs. And we are not letting up on the gas. We will be moving forward with all of our action alerts. Sierra Club as well, all of our organizations will be moving ahead with action alerts over the next week to try to increase the number of comments and also inform substantive comments in order to support our efforts and that our whole goal here as a coalition. So please, if you can, take a few minutes. If you are a member of an organization, then look in your organization's website, look for the action alerts that are coming out, and we will be really happy to see more people join with us, speaking with one voice to Pennsylvania. Protect us. It's our constitutional right to have pure water.
Okay, excellent. Thank you, everyone. Thank you again, Senator Comitta. This has been a great program, and hopefully we'll see this over the finish line.